question that's so deep and dear to my heart. That is such a concern for me,
good.
and my family, and my future, and that is: does porn damage the brain?
No. God damn it.
Can you talk about that? Because there's obviously that meme going around that porn damages the brain.
It does not damage the brain. It doesn't.
Are you Thor?
There's so many memes going around, and all of them are like equally dumb. The one that I hate the most is the one that uses actual like images of the brain. Actual, I think they're MRI images, and tries to demonstrate that porn is damaging the brain because they're like, look at this growth or whatever. But it's not even a growth. It's the ventral striatum is like a part. It's part of the reward center of your brain. And people who watch a lot of porn have a slightly overactive ventral striatum, so it lights up a bit more in an MRI. So it's not growing or changing. It's still exactly the same fucking size as it always was. It's just more neurons are firing when you watch porn or think about porn in the ventral striatum. If you like porn a lot, and that's all that says. That's literally all that fucking says. And that your reward center might be slightly overreactive, but many different things could lead to that. Many.
Interesting. So I started this off as a bit of a joke question, but in all seriousness, is it like I was taught in church that, you start watching porn and then you'll be turned gay and then you'll be blowing Jesus a dude Christ. Behind the, all the every man's battle kind of stuff. Or they interviewed Ted Bundy and they said, Ted Bundy said that every serial killer has a fascination with porn, and it's like,
oh yes, because he would know, and he's notoriously honest as well.
Yeah. What's also interesting is like, but it's also like, I don't know what criminal is like, no, I'm not going to look at porn. That's immoral. Like, what who's doing? What criminal's doing that? Anyway, so is there any like concern for someone? I'm getting all seriousness now. I'm serious now. I'm taking notes. Is there any like actual issue with consuming too much porn, or like from a neurological, physiological perspective?
Kind of is the answer to that. And that's not me being evasive. It's the truth, because porn can be a maladaptive coping strategy because it's dopamine inducing, right? So porn will activate your reward center, and it'll also activate your motor cortex. So it activates several reasons. Your motor cortex for obvious reasons. You got to do some things with your hands usually when you're watching porn. There's some things are moving and reacting, and also you're gonna like your somatosensory cortex is receiving some information as well. Yeah. About some touching that's taking place.
Not me. So, I only watch it and never touch myself.
It's an art form. I'm just appreciating the art form. I love art. This is why.
And I have a deep appreciation for this art form.
It's just I'm a media critic is what I am. And I'm just
media critic.
This is
that's
all
great.
just me learning and gathering information. But it can become because it's dopamine releasing. It can become a maladaptive habit. So it can be something that becomes habit forming that you do repetitively as a form of sating depressive or anxiolytic thoughts. And if that's something that can give you temporary relief, and you continuously do it because it's giving you temporary relief, like exposing yourself to the pornography and doing whatever comes with it, you can eventually get to the point that you build up those pathways enough that it's no longer it's no longer something that you're doing to satisfy or gratify yourself. It's something that you're doing as a maladaptive habit. So it becomes a slightly more of a compulsion and less of a satisfying endeavor, because of that. That could be also a concern with things like gambling or shopping or video games. Like they get the same pathways are activated for the same reasons to get the same result that can form the same type of maladaptive habits for the same reasons with those activities as well. So there's nothing special about porn when it comes to that. But it could be a maladaptive coping strategy. Like, it's not just 100% across the board, always good for you activity to do. But it in and of itself, I see as kind of like an amoral activity that more often than not, 99.9% of the time, is just a normal thing that normal people do because they're normal, and it shouldn't be shamed. And so long as everybody is informed and enthusiastic and consenting and compensated appropriately that's involved in it, from the production end, I say have at it, no problem. Sex work is work. That's great. Like, let's not kink shame. Let's like go do you. But you can't, like, the world is nuanced, right? You have to accept the fact that that for some people it could become a problem. And
when you say become a problem, is that like the same as like people who play video games all day, or people who watch porn all day, or people who is it the same with alcoholism? Like
alcoholism has a chemical component, so not quite the same, right?
Okay.
So alcoholism, you're introducing a substance into your system that's fundamentally changing your neurochemical biosphere, right?
Yeah.
So the biosphere is probably not the word that I'm looking for, but
you've had many rums.
Yes, I've changed my biosphere. My biosphere is augmenting as we speak. But yeah, so alcoholism has a chemical component, right? So you can create an actual physiological dependency on something like an alcohol. Same with nicotine, same with caffeine, same with, like, morphine, any kind of opiates. Those are all things that can create an actual physiological biochemical dependency. You can't create a physiological biochemical dependency on porn. The porn itself isn't the problem in these. It's like porn gets assigned the designation of the problem when really it's, the temporary self-medication that people are using for the actual problem. The actual problem is usually something like a situational or chronic depression, or a severe social anxiety or neurochemical anxiety, or trauma, or right? Like, these are underlying psychosocial or neurodivergence issues that need to be, like, identified appropriately so that they can be addressed appropriately. And when they aren't, the coping mechanisms for them can manifest as dopamine-seeking behaviors that then become maladaptive habits. And then the habit the maladaptive habit is what ends up being blamed as the problem. Like, people work backwards and say, well, porn made you do this, when really, like, something was going on and you turned to that.
So that's very interesting. So are you saying, like, the average person, woman, man, who wakes up in the morning, looks at some porn on their phone, plays themselves, and then moves on with their day, that's one thing. But then someone who is, like, getting yelled at by their boss and then runs into the bathroom to masturbate to try and remove that anxiety or whatever. You're saying there's like that's like
the maladaptive coping habit.
Okay, so that's the differentiation. Right?
Like, you learned at some point in time that you get that dopamine boost or whatever from that activity, because you do, and you utilized that to cope with things instead of actually coping with them, right? Or like you start to become more and more socially isolated, as an example as well. Like, that's something that happens when you have severe anxiety or depressive disorders. You start to become more socially isolated and more overwhelmed. Well, what's a thing that you can do to, when you're alone consistently and socially isolated and overwhelmed, that's an activity that will give you a sense of at least temporary satisfaction and, some sort of like positive stimulation. Well, viewing pornography and masturbating is probably something that's easily accessible that you could do that would give you that temporary release. Is that something that you could end up doing more and more consistently as you become increasingly isolated? Is that something that you could then affiliate with the sense of isolation or choose over social interactions going forward because you formed a habit around it, and now it's the only thing in your recent recall that's given you any kind of pleasure, and everything else is terrifying? And also now it's wrapped up with all of this sense of shame that it's imbued with too, right? Because society gives you this sense of shame about it. So now you're constantly ashamed, and that's increasing the anxiety and depression, which is causing you to turn more to pornography, which is increasing your social isolation. The porn, like, what is the porn really the problem there? No,
it's not.
the porn is the worst thing that you could continue doing probably, and you're going to need to completely secede from it at some point in time until you can learn to use it normally. But in order for you to learn to use it normally, what you need to do is address the underlying problem that you're using the porn to self-medicate poorly, and then creating that maladaptive habit around. Does that make sense?
Oh, it does. And I feel like I'd love to have you on another time to talk about addiction, because there's a lot of addiction. I've got a lot of history in my family of addiction, and I'd love to talk to you about I've had for a while, I've had some suspicions about the way that we treat addiction with like AA and NA and stuff like that.
Oh, they're bad news.
Yeah, so I'd love to talk to you more about that. But moving on.
Oh, that was one question.
That was yeah.